Over the years in tennis, so much emphasis has been put on the point of contact on the forehand. How far away from the body is the racket? Is the arm more straight? Is the arm more bent? And rightfully so. It's an important factor. It's an important technical element. But unfortunately, the solution, the way that a lot of people have tried to fix a late contact point, is completely focused on the symptom and not the actual problem. So let me dive into exactly what I mean, and I'll give you some examples of a real student that I just had a couple days ago. So first, just for context, let's look at exactly what we're talking about here. What we're talking about when people say make contact out in front is this amount of space between the racket and the body as contact is made. If contact is made way far back, then the body's just in a weak, unstable position. The arm has to do a lot of work, and making contact in front puts things in an athletic, strong position and allows for a really smooth, relaxed follow-through because the body's doing more of the work. So that's the amount of space between Roger on his forehand. Here's the amount of space between the body and the racket of Alcaraz on his forehand. And here's the amount of space between the racket and the body on Novak's forehand. So some different styles here, right? Some of these players are more bent arm like Novak. Some of these players are more straight arm like Roger. But all of them have this gap between their body and their racket. And so it must be important, right? Here's Sinner, space between his racket and his body. Here is Aliassime, amount of space between his racket and his body as he makes contact. So great, contact out in front, right? That's been kind of the mantra forever, is meet the ball out in front. So yes, it's important. You see me like smiling. The thing is, it's a symptom. It's not the root cause. When somebody has a contact point that looks like my student did a couple of days ago, so here's her making contact, and you can see like it's pretty good. Like she has some space, but not nearly as much, right? And so it's easy to look at that result and say, okay, we need to work on our contact point. We need to make contact farther out in front. And so typically the instruction or like the piece of advice to this player would be make contact further in front. And so what do we focus on? When that's the instruction, when that's the advice, we focus on the actual racket. We focus on the point of contact. We focus on what's connected to the racket. Well, it's the hand and it's the arm. So let's get the contact point further out in front. Generally, all the focus and all the emphasis is on the small parts of the body. But here's the thing. That's just a symptom. It's not the root cause. Here's why. When you look at this player, where are her hips facing and where are her shoulders facing? I want you to look at how much further back her left shoulder is compared to her right shoulder. And I want you to look at how much further back her right hip is from her left hip. You see this gap between the two? I mean, this is like, she's probably a foot further back with her right shoulder, and she's also probably about a foot further back with her right hip. What is connected to her shoulders and hips and her torso? Well, it's her arm, and her elbow is connected to her arm, and her hand is connected to her elbow, and the racket is connected to her hand. So if these big pieces are stuck back, and if her arm is connected to her hand, and her hand is connected to the racket, do you see how there's a chain reaction here? And if her body hasn't turned far enough by the time contact is made, then what's happened here is this whole chunk, this whole sequence of arm and elbow and forearm and wrist and hand, if all of that is caught too far back behind her, then she can't reach any further far in front as long as her right shoulder is back behind her body and her right hip is back behind her body. So with this image in mind, I'm going to go back to those players we just used a second ago. So just real fresh in your mind. Actually, you know what, let's see if I can set this up real fast here. I think I'll probably be able to. So here's those pro players that we looked at just a second ago. And yeah, I think I can probably set this up real quick. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so let's look at the body position here. Well, what do you know? Look at the hips and look at the shoulders. Felix, like his right shoulder is actually in front of his left. So it's the opposite for him. And his hips are about even. They're about parallel to the baseline, whereas her right hip is significantly further back. All right, let's go through real quick. So all these same swings that we looked at contact, okay, so Roger's shoulders are parallel. One isn't ahead of the other, and his hips are pretty close to parallel too. His right hip might be a little bit back, but it's very close to facing forwards. That's what creates the space. And then here is Carlos, the point of contact. His right shoulder looks like it's a little in front of his left, and his hips are even. His hips are facing forwards. You see how different this is? And do you see the chain reaction? You see how one leads to the other? All right, next up, here's Novak at the point of contact. His shoulders are level, and his hips are level. So that leaves more space because his whole self, his entire body, is rotated forwards sooner in the whole sequence. All right, here's Yannick at the point of contact. Oh, look at that. His right shoulder's a little bit in front of his left, and his hips are facing forwards. That gives him all this space between his body and the racket. And we already looked at Felix. So the contact point, yes, of course, it's important, but it's a symptom. It's the symptom of the body being too late. And as long as the emphasis is put on the surface level, which is like the contact point, it is important, and it is an athletic, like a critical part of hitting a strong ball. But it's just the symptom in this context. As long as the body doesn't do what it's supposed to do, all kinds of other things like the follow through, like the contact point, like what the hand and the wrist do through the point of contact, all those things might be wildly thrown off, but they're symptoms. They're not the root cause. So this is my student before working together. And now let me show you my student like an hour later. And during this hour of training and coaching together, I did not one time emphasize the point of not one time. I didn't bring it up. We didn't talk about it. It wasn't a goal of hers to make contact further out in front. None of those things. But after an hour of training and working together, and I'll link you to the drills that we did together in a second. Holy crap, look at this. This is wildly different, right? And yes, we have all this space between her racket and her body, but it's not from focusing on the space between her racket and her body. It's from focusing on what's important, the thing below the surface. When she turns her shoulders, when she turns her hips, that brings her racket and her arm further in front sooner in the whole sequence relative to where the ball is, and that leads her to hitting the ball further out in front. And so after about 45 minutes or 60 minutes of training, she was nailing this further out in front contact point, but not because she was thinking about hitting further out in front, because she was thinking about the thing that leads to making contact further out in front. And that is the rotation of her body. So real quick, let me show you full speed. I know a lot of times you guys like to see the full speed. So let me show it to you real quick. Here's her before forehands, and I'll just go ahead and I'll play through a bunch of these for you. So here's what her forehand looked like before working together, before talking. You can see on a lot of these, she's like kind of cranking her arm over to finish the swing. And that's because her body is late. And so her arm has to do extra work. Sometimes she did better than others. But on that, you see that one, how it just looks like she's kind of muscling that one. And she's using a lot of extra arm. And the reason why, and again, like average focus point is going to be the contact point, but the contact point is late because the body is late. And when the contact point is late and the body is late, then the arm has to do this extra flippy, turny stuff to get the racket through and actually finish the shot. Whereas when the body actually unwinds at the appropriate time, all those other things tend to kind of take care of themselves. So here's her. This is just me feeding to her. And watch the difference here with her body opening up. Look at how much more room she has to operate, how much more athletic and strong this looks, how much smoother and more natural that follow-through is. We didn't talk about the follow-through. We didn't talk about the contact point. We didn't talk about hitting further out in front. We didn't talk about finishing over the shoulder, but she's doing all those things better because the thing beneath the surface is stronger, and that is the rotation. It all starts. It's all body. It's like the more and more I teach, the more I realize that it all connects back. It all has its roots in the base of the kinetic chain, which is the big, strong, stable parts of the body. All right, hopefully this is helpful. I'll put a link to the actual drills we did on the screen right now. You can go check that video out. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again later.